the new premium tank is within World of Tanks console right now, and it is of course the Charlemagne, the tier 8 British heavy tank that you can actually pick up in the game, although it will cost you a hefty amount, and in the region of 14,900 or alternatively 11,915 gold, so you're looking at about £30 for this premium tank. And is it really worth it? Well, today's video will get into it, and it is one of my favourite premium tanks that's come into the game, and we'll get a little bit into that. So what do we know about the Charlemagne and how it actually plays within the game? Well, first things first, it has a pretty meaty alpha damage gun, and it can kind of pack a punch, I guess, against some of the other tier 8 heavy tanks within the game. Of course, it's on similar sort of par with a defender in terms of the amount of damage it can do, but it does have the ability to actually dish out that damage to opponents kind of more reliably, but also not reliably. Now, when I talk about that, it's because it has 270mm of penetration on its premium rounds, and this is a tank, unfortunately, for those of you who want to use it as a silver earner, you have to fire premium. That's not only because the premium rounds are basically better in terms of the penetration value, so you'll reliably do the damage. You get nearly twice the shell velocity. Well, 1.5 times even. A bit of an overestimation there, but literally 1.5 times the shell velocity. You get better penetration, which means that you're going to be able to hit things a lot better. The standard rounds feel like they're HE rounds, and for the most part, HE rounds go literally the same speed as the AP round. So yeah, exactly. That's what I thought, and it is just not a tank that I think works very well if you do fire the AP rounds. Yes, you'll be able to pen and you'll be able to do the damage, but it's, in my eyes, pay to kind of play this tank. And I guess for the most part, when you're playing a premium tank, you can earn that silver back, and you'll see that in the couple of games that we're going to showcase within this review. However, the equipment that we're taking in this tank is advanced loader, advanced optics, and crucially, and I mean crucially, gun stabilizer. You need this within your game. It is so important on this tank, and that's because if we go to the detailed statistics tab, you can see there in the middle section on the left, accuracy at 100 meters, 0.39. This is atrocious. Add that with the aiming time of 3.36 seconds. That's with a commander that has perks on it. Yeah, a 3.5 second aim time is disgusting, and the accuracy is awful as well. So yeah, you can do 440 alpha, but if you compare it to something like a Carnarvon, it cannot hit on the move whatsoever, and that's kind of the trade-off you're going to be getting with this tank. View range is okay if you actually put on the advanced optics, but it's not necessary all of the time because it is a heavy tank at the end of the day. But what you want to be doing with this tank is being very aggressive because of the armor model of the tank, and if you can get this thing on a ridgeline, it can become nearly impossible to pen, and that's because the turret armor is really good for a tier 8 heavy. You've also got fantastic upper plate armor, and most importantly, really good lower plate armor as well, because you've got 168mm of armor on the bottom, as you can see on this front plate here, which means that yeah, you can bounce a lot of rounds with this tank, and most people will go for that big British lower plate, and it isn't necessarily that much of a weak point, although, you know, 168mm even with the angle can get penned by most tier 8s firing premium rounds, and yeah, you 100% will, and even if they don't fire at your lower plate, they can just shoot the upper plate and go straight through that, because the angle is quite nice for people to be able to do that. But you can still bounce a few rounds, but you need to be frontal with this tank because the side armor is absolutely terrible, and you'll get penned really reliably by anyone that manages to get a whiff of that. And of course you do have the cupola on the top of the turret which people can hit, but use the 10 degrees of gun depression that the tank gets, making it almost impossible for people to hit that cupola when you're using the 10 degrees. Enough talking about the tank, let's actually showcase what it can do in the game, and let's see you there. The first gameplay we have for you today is on El Haluf, and it's a map that I actually really enjoy, especially when playing heavy tanks, because I feel like you can be really top notch in the corner over on the left hand side of the map, and when you take that position in something like a Charlemagne that has the turret armor and the hull armor and just the overall mobility and flexibility on a ridgeline, not necessarily the fastest tank, as you can see right here, going 30 kilometers an hour top speed. Maybe you want to take the speed boost equipment in this tank, and that wouldn't be necessarily the worst thing that you could possibly do. Obviously, from this point, what we can do is hope to get some early shots, because with the Charlemagne, you need to be keeping the gun firing, because the DPM of this tank is awful, especially if you can't actually get the shots lined up because of the mobility, and just, yeah, it's not a tank that is particularly easy to get loads and loads and loads of damage in. It certainly can rack up damage really quickly if you can keep that gun firing, but when you then want to progress a flank and you are quite far away from any opponents, it's really, really hard to do that. Obviously, you can see us taking this position here, which I recommend if you ever play in the Charlemagne on El Haluf, and that's because basically you're nearly impenetrable. Like, they can only see parts of your turret armor, which is obviously really, really strong, and they can only see the top of the upper plate. Obviously, if you release like the lower plate of your tank by over committing and over showing that lower plate, then yeah, they're going to be able to pen it really easily because they'll be looking up into it. But it doesn't matter when we're playing in this game, because we can use that ridgeline. We know how to use the Charlemagne, and so yeah, we can rack up that damage pretty quickly. You can see here just the length of reload at which, you know, multiple people got to cross there with absolutely no punishment, and unfortunately none of our team decided to actually punish them either. So this is the thing about playing with these sort of tanks, and I guess what we'll talk about now is whether or not it is actually kind of a good idea for wargaming to bring in these more balanced tanks, and the Charlemagne is definitely a balanced tank within World of Tanks console. And that's because the reload is long enough to make it so that opponents, if they cannot pen you, can get around you. They can also fire at some of the weak points, because there are some on the Charlemagne, being that side armor. Basically, this is really only good if you are controlling like a ridgeline and you're pushing out the damage as quickly as possible, because this thing does not take down enemy opponents quickly. It is kind of like a slow attrition, and that's why you need the game to last long in the Charlemagne if you want to have a good game, or alternatively your team just get taken out and you're able to fight off the opponents 1 against 1. Obviously that never really happens within World of Tanks, so you can see where I think the Charlemagne gets let down. It's just that kind of slow movement, slow DPM, everything about it feels a little bit slow, and I guess that's where being good at positioning comes in really, really clutch, and where you can actually begin to start feeling like you're on top, and where you have to actually play really well in terms of where you're putting yourself on the map. So I think it's actually a good one for learning map positioning, because if you don't do the map position right, it is really, really obvious to you that you did something wrong, and then you can think about changing it to be able to make better decisions next time. And I also think that this tank is really, really good for kind of teaching new players as well about the game and how you can kind of use the tank. It's really easy to use. It's basically keep your frontal armor towards the opponents and try and get on a hill if possible, and then dish out the damage as quickly as possible. And if you just want to be consistent, fire premium rounds, because yes, it's come to that stage where wargaming are deciding to release tanks that are literally, there's no reason why you'd fire standard ammo, because it's just terrible. Yeah, the shell velocity absolutely ruins the standard ammunition, having the same shell velocity as a HE round. Disgusting. And obviously you compare that to something like a Defender, I just don't think that this tank is actually anywhere near as good, you know, or at least with the gun handling. And so yeah, I think that that's where this tank comes in a little bit poor comparatively to some of the other tier 8 tanks. However, really, really fun to play. It's something new that I haven't really seen within the game in a long time, and I think that the fact that it is actually balanced makes it somewhat fun to play. You'll notice here that the mobility, we are limited, and even going down the slope at a pretty nice angle as well, you can see us only reaching like 30 to 35 kilometers an hour. I know obviously to look over to the left because there's 2 tank destroyers, they're probably going to be there. Unfortunately we take a hit there, probably from the SU 130 PM on the enemy team, which is not a nice tank to get hit by, and you can see us here getting hit once again, and this is where I thought, oh, I've really made a misplay. I knew I was going to take a hit or 2 coming down here, but didn't realise I'd be taking 2 of those tank destroyer hits, especially when it's a Borsig and an SU 130 PM. But 2,647 damage means that we're definitely up on the trading within this game, but I could have played a little bit better there. But I really wanted to make sure we wouldn't lose to cap. But yeah, definitely could have done something a little different. Obviously there, Turtle, you're not getting away when I've got the APCR rounds loaded in this tank, and he definitely doesn't get away with trying to run away either, as our teammate shuts him down. 3,047 damage. And you can see us here just trying to get around into the Borsig. But once again, let down by that shell velocity. Even with the APCR round, you're still looking at a top speed of your ammunition of 950 meters a second, which is very, very average for a tank round, at least on World of Tanks, especially if you're firing your premium ammunition, which usually has slightly better speed of rounds. So there's always that. And as much as I'm saying, oh, you should be firing premium with this tank, yeah, I don't think that there's any real negative to firing premium rounds, and so I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people playing the Charlemagne only load premium rounds, because it is a premium tank. You can earn your money back, and if you don't take them, you are at a significant disadvantage, not just from the fact that you don't have to aim as much, but literally the fact that you can hit much more consistently. From this point, you know, maybe it's not really risky to go after the SU-130PM, because there are 6 tanks left on our team, but maybe it is a little bit kind of, I could potentially get taken out, and then it would be a real disappointment if our team then got slowly withered away, because it is a top tier game. You know, the SU-130PM can use the camo, concealment and the high alpha damage that the tank gets to potentially take us out, but that's not going to be the case when we've got a HE round loaded, which we plant straight into the SU, and it takes away a very nice chunk of his hit points, and means that, yeah, now we can push in. He's a one-shot, and there's not really much he can do. He'd have to high roll to be able to take us out from the game, I believe. Or maybe he wouldn't even, because I think the SU-130 gets a 520 alpha damage gun. So, yeah, he'd have to low roll even for us to be taken out. But regardless of that, we're pushing on forward within this game. We've picked up 1,161 assistance, and although, you know, you shouldn't be relying on assistance damage within this tank, you can certainly get some if you're using the advanced optics. As with most tanks, you just have to position yourself, and you'll learn that with this tank. Do I think it's actually worth paying for and purchasing within World of Tanks console? Oh, no. As much as I love the tank, I find it really, really interesting to play. It's a kind of a new, fresh aspect to the game. Is it worth £30? I just don't think so if you're after a competitive tank, but if you're after a new, kind of interesting one that can kind of make the armor model work, and you have to work to the map that you're playing on, then maybe the Charlemagne is for you. As you can see there, a 4k damage game, 1,161 assistance, being kind of shown up by the SU-130PM there, having come kind of first, but he managed to pick up 5,300 damage just under, and 5 enemies destroyed. As you can see us looking over at him. A pretty decent tank overall. Hopefully you enjoyed this review. Obviously, if you've picked up the Charlemagne, let me know what you actually think of the tank. Do you think Wargaming finally released a tank that was completely balanced and actually not super overpowered like a lot of the premium tanks coming out of Wargaming's offices recently? Obviously, let me know in the comment section down below, and check out the update news for this week, for yesterday, and also you can check out some other gameplay on screen right now. Thanks for watching, hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I hope you'll join me in the next video. Goodbye.